Hello, welcome to my presentation on electronic communication in the workplace. Being in the 21st century, there are a lot of electronic communication tools at your disposal. Knowing some basic guidelines and rules can make sure you use those effectively and you can get the most out of them. Let's start off by looking at probably the most widely used electronic communication tool we have, which is the email. Email is very widely used in the business world, and it has many advantages. Some of the advantages of using email are it's way more convenient and a way of sharing information, and it's faster. Regular mail can take days to send a letter, and especially if it's of importance, you might not want to go with regular mail. Telephone is a better way. It's faster, but it's not very convenient, especially if you've ever played telephone tag, where you call one person and then you miss them, and they call you back and they miss you, and it just comes a back and forth tag of trying to reach the other person. Another thing about telephones is time zones. If especially if your business is global, you don't want to be calling one of your customers or representatives in the middle of the night, just because you think it's normal on your time. Sometimes we forget that other countries are in different time zones and vice versa. Email is you can just send an email and then the receiver will get to it whenever they get to a computer. It's also it reduces cost and paper waste, especially if you're using postal. That could get pricey, and long distance, again with the telephone, you can call somebody a long distance, but it does cost more money, whereas email, it's cheaper and it's a more efficient way of using it. Email does come with some disadvantages. One disadvantage of email is no real-time response. The thing with email is you can send a message, but you won't get a message back until the receiver reads it and sends something back. If the email is of importance, you might have to see yourself waiting until the responder gets back to you. It's also not very secure. There's a lot of hacks. The Sony hack, for instance, that was an example of how email can be hacked into, and especially if you have sensitive information, that's one of the disadvantages of having email. Another thing that it has a disadvantage, it's very impersonal. It does reduce face-to-face communication, and I do think a lot of businesses rely on email a little too much. It's important to learn that even though email does cut back on times, you shouldn't really rely on it that much. Face-to-face communication is always something we're gonna need, and it's important to know when you're writing an email, is this really something I want to write in through electronic, or is this a little something more personal I want to say face to face? Another thing about email is you get a hard copy of, let's say you have some heated words with somebody, there's actual, they could just save the email and they have a hard copy of it. Whereas if you say heated words over the phone or face to face, there's no real evidence. That's why you have to be careful about writing emails, which is we'll get to that in the next slide about writing emails when you're angry. One last thing is email is not very reliable. I mean, it's mostly is, but sometimes your emails could be sent to spam. Sometimes your email won't be sent at all. It could be a glitch in the internet. You never know, especially if it's something sensitive. This is something you might want to think about when you're actually using email. Some of the guidelines you want to stick to using email is a subject line. A subject line really lets the receiver know what the email is about. So it's important to use a very effective subject line. That way the receiver, in case it's important, the receiver knows it's important and they can get back to you in promptly time. When you try to write email, it's important to try to focus just on one topic. If you focus on 3 or 4 topics, the receiver might not end up responding back to all of them. So try to keep the topics to at least 1 or 2 at max. It's also important to keep your email short. If you have a long email, it's probably better if you put an attachment onto it Very long emails are very they're time consuming. Especially in the business world. Try to keep your email short and to the point. It's just good business, and you don't want to overload people with a bunch of emails and useless information that they might not need. One last thing is a very important, revise. Before you actually send your email, make sure you revise your email, especially in business. There's nothing more unprofessional than sending an email that has bad grammar, punctuation, or spelling. It's always important that you revise all your emails, even if they're short. That you don't want to come off as somebody who's lazy, or doesn't have very good grammar. It's just not good in business, and it doesn't really present well. Here's an example of what not to do. This is an example of a bad email. As you can see right here, there's no subject. This is what they call flaming, is when you write it in all caps. This is very unprofessional. It could come as off as being angry. You can also see the use of shorthand writing, smiley faces. This is just a pretty good example of what your email shouldn't look like. There's another example in your handout of what an email is supposed to look like, and try to stick to that example right there. It's short, it has a good subject line, it has introductions, and it has endings very well. To effectively use email in business, here are some of the guidelines that you should stick to. Respond to a timely manner. It's usually good customs to respond within at least 24 hours of when an email is sent. Any longer, and the sender might think that you're brushing them off, and it's just very unprofessional. Make sure your emails are also properly formatted. Subject line, introductions, sinceres. It just comes off as better, very professional. Don't continue to email overload. You only want to send emails when you actually have to, and when it's of vital importance. Don't send out emails, a lot. It'll just flood people's inboxes, and they might not pay attention, and they'll just erase them. And you might send something important one time, and they'll just delete it. So try to keep your emails to only importance things. Don't send emails when you're angry, as we saw from the example. Flaming, all caps. That's very unprofessional, and it's very rude. You shouldn't really do that in business and in your own personal emails. Don't ever deliver bad news. It's very impersonal, like I said. Delivering bad news is something very personal and should probably be left to face-to-face communications. Email is not really the best way to be to deliver bad news, especially if it's something like somebody's being fired or something. It's better to keep those things personal and face-to-face. Also, if you're using a work email, make sure you keep it strictly business. Don't use it to email friends. Tell them, Jim, you're gonna meet him at the pub later or something. Try to keep business and your personal email separated from each other. Instant messaging. This is it's been around for a while, but instant messaging can be very great asset in the business world. The thing with instant messages that email doesn't have is that instant messaging is you do get an instant response, whereas email you don't. Instant messaging is probably a more convenient way of communicating than email, because you can talk back and forth and have an instant response like that. Another advantage is you can also use, due to instant messaging, it has over telephone, is you can actually work on something while you're instant messaging. Whereas if you're on the telephone, it's kind of hard to multitask, trying to talk and do something at the same time. One thing that the instant messaging does have a disadvantage is some employees will may use them to talk to their friends or fellow coworkers during company time. This is very unprofessional, and some employers might want to watch out for this. Try to stress to your employees, instant messaging is strictly business. Try to keep an eye on it. It's there, but it can be misused for other reasons. Um, some of the guidelines are the same for instant messages. Try to keep your messages short. Don't write angrily. Just remember etiquette. Proper grammar, punctuation, all that. Although I will say that grammar doesn't really matter in instant messaging, seeing it has very short conversations. Shorthand is very widely used in instant messages. Some examples of shorthand, as you can see right here, are they're just a faster way of communicating. Uh, you know, before. Uh, MYOB. Some of these are, you can fairly use these in instant messaging. The one thing I will advise is try to use common terms. Try to stay away from stuff that, try to some shorthand that probably some people won't understand, like call you later. Just try to use your best judgment. Try to keep it professional too. Don't try to write a whole sentence using shorthand. Instant messaging is meant to be fast, but try to use them intermittently. It In your handout, you'll see another list of some more shorthand examples if you want to see what some are. And one last thing I will talk about is text messaging. Text messaging has been around for quite a while, but most people don't think you text messaging in the business world. It's a fairly new concept, but text messaging should be used very wisely. The only time you should probably use text messaging is when you have short, brief, statements, like asking somebody for a meeting, or text messaging shouldn't be used as email and instant messaging. It's just a way of telling somebody that the meeting's been moved, or just a quick update or something. Just like instant messaging, you can use shorthand. I will still try to keep it business like though. uh, it's important to stick. Email has many guidelines that you can stick by. Etiquette, don't write all caps and all that. This should be widely used on all fronts in electronic communication. um, to wrap up my presentation, electronic communication can be a very vital tool in the business world, but if you don't use it correctly and you don't follow, the guidelines, it can it can come it can be very disastrous. Like I said, on the instant messaging, employees can use it to talk to friends. Email, you can use it. Bosses probably can use email too much that they forget to use face to face with employees. It's important to know that electronic communications it's a vital tool, is not a replacement to regular sorts of communications. They both have their goods and they both have their bads. Uh, what I will say is, whenever you're trying to decide whether to use electronic communication or use regular traditional communication, try to think about what the context is. If it's very personal and had like bad news or something, you probably should stick to face to face. If it's something that can wait or just business, you probably use electronic communications. Uh, you know, I would like to thank you to come to my presentation. Uh, Feel free to look over the handouts. As I said, there's some examples of stuff that I've talked about. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thank you for coming, and I hope you learned a lot and how to effectively use electronic communications in your workplace.